Sunset Strip Killer, featuring Doug Clark. Full name, Douglas Daniel Clark. Crimes and Sprees. Douglas was known to be an American, specifically a serial killer in Los Angeles, California, Sun Strip. In addition, he was known to engage in necrophiliac activities with his known victims along with his accomplice Carol Bundy. It was noted Doug would target vulnerable teenage girls, who was also known to be victimized in prosecution. Doug was known to use the method of kidnapping or robbing his victims, who were vulnerable, in addition easily targeted. Other than the method of kidnap, Doug was known to use the method of luring his victims inside his vehicle, with the promise of money and sex work. He would use a gun to execute his victims. In addition, he would aim at the worst area possible, reportedly such as their mouths, private areas, and head. With the corpses, he would dump them in alleys, studios, freeways, and behind the dumpster near the restaurants. In other words, scattering the corpses in all over the places in Los Angeles. It was reported in one of the occasions, Doug would freeze the head of one of his victims in a refrigerator, specifically the freezer. In the record of Douglas, other than murders, he was once reported that he would rape a 11-year-old neighbor, in addition creating his own pornography with the photos of the child's private areas. Overall, the crimes of Douglas committed was heavily focused on sexual fantasies and acts. Investigation. The LAPD, during the investigation involving the case of Doug, was structured with severe complications due to the fact the bodies of his victims were scattered in varieties of areas in California, specifically Los Angeles County. Ironically, in one of the occasions, Doug's accomplice, Carol, had claimed to call the police on him. However, due to her unstructured words and lack of details, the police would dismiss the report. In addition, Carol had changed her mind and instead engaged with the acts of crimes, along with her boyfriend Douglas. Carol was really the reason for the arrest of Doug. She was once drugged, then would brag about her crimes to her ex-boyfriend, John Murray. Carol would panic about the careless confession she made and would murder her ex-boyfriend, which led to her confessing to the police from the immense guilt she felt. It was reported she would confess Doug had used the .25 caliber pistols. In addition, she would lead the detectives to a blood pool bathtub in Doug's home. Not so long after, Douglas was arrested and held in custody by the LAPD. Therefore, the arrest had ended the horror of the Sunset Strip killers. Trial and court proceedings. The trial and court proceedings for the case of Douglas had taken place between the late 1982 and the early 1983. Douglas had fired his own lawyers to make himself stand for the case and the murders he had committed. His strategy involved shifting the blame towards his accomplice and her ex-boyfriend, claiming they were the real Sunset Strip killers, and that he was innocent the whole time. During their interviews in that time, he would deny committing any of the crimes, placing a barrier of apparent innocence between himself and the interviewers in front of him. Carol had taken place as someone who would testify against Douglas during court, along with one of their surviving victims, Marcy Lewis, a 14-year-old girl who survived the bullet shot. There were a significant amount of forensic evidence that went against Douglas, proving he was psychotic. In addition, he was completely detached from humanity. On January 28, 1993, Douglas was found guilty on 6 first-degree murders, attempted murders, mayhem, and mutilation of human remains. Sorry, I meant to say 1983. Hold on, is it? Yeah, it's 1983. Apologies. He was originally set to receive the death penalty. However, due to the complications in the law in California, the death penalty was removed from his case, leading to him being imprisoned for the rest of his life. Childhood. The childhood of Doug was highly structured and held no negatives within the household. In other words, he was highly wealthy and had a comfortable childhood. Despite the positives, there was a negative that grew within him, an arousal of dark sexual fantasies that stuck with him. He had strong desires on raping females, along with having domination and necrophilia with the girls around him. Personal life, potentially affecting their crimes and acts. Reaching his adulthood from his childhood, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force, where he stationed in bases such as in Ohio and Colorado. However, he did not maintain a career as a military soldier. He would drift apart around the beginning of the 1970s. He was married to a female named Beverly on 1972. However, that lasted for 4 years, leading to a divorce in 1976. Doug did not have a successful employment career. He was often fired from jobs, either quitted them himself or got fired. Doug would go to bars, specifically the Little Nashville Club in North Hollywood. He would do sex work with other females who seemed to have a lonely life. However, Doug could not maintain an emotionally genuine relationship with the females around. Therefore, he would stop contacting them, then target other females for his sexual desires. On Christmas Day in 1979, Doug met his accomplice, future accomplice in his murders, Carol, at the Little Nashville Club. Despite the unique appearance that Carol had, Doug would agree to date and then have sexual relationships with her. Carol was reportedly sexually attracted to, in a way, attached to Doug in a very unhealthy way, in addition sharing similar desires, leading to the mind escalating to murders. Pivotal events. Douglas Daniel Clark, Doug Clark, was born on the 10th of March, 1948 in North Middletown Township, Pennsylvania. From birth year of Doug Clark to the year of 1967, Doug was heavily involved in the life of the military. From 1972 to 1976, Doug was married to Beverly before the divorce. In the early 1980s, Douglas met his accomplice, Carol. The Sunset Strip killing spree had occurred from June of 1980 to July of 1980. On February 15, 1983, Douglas was sentenced to San Quentin, California State Prison. Quotes from Douglas Daniel Clark, Doug Clark, in other names. The king of one-night stands. I want to kill a woman during the intercourse so I can feel her body tighten as she dies. I was set up. Carol Bundy and John Murray were the real killers, and they framed me to look like a copycat of Ted Bundy. That's another bullshit story. I want to ask your viewers, what would you do if you see a head of a woman sitting on top of a sink? Downtown robbery homicide cops had this case up. Can I say on TV? I don't give a shit. Screw this shit. Let's play bullshit games. Document this crap on TV. You know Ken Bianchi, the Hillside Stranglers? Carol, that bullshit falsely accused me on the murders. The scumbags are idolized way too much. Forensic inferences. The case of Doug is really like the case where someone's dark fantasies grows into such much bigger and worse. There is no doubt Douglas had a good and wealthy life. Additionally, he had seemingly nice parents. It's likely his family was not aware of his dark fantasies. He knew probably if he revealed his dark secret and his sexual fantasies, he would either be in trouble or sent to facilities he did not desire to be in. A sense of pressure may have, while not proven, was built within his mentality. There was an unhealthy obsession with or inside of his mental that grew throughout the years of his life. He likely never told anyone, definitely not his parents either. Unlike the case of Dennis Lynn Rader, where his parents would witness the partial red flags, or in the case of Richard Trenton Chase, where his mother directly witnessed the negative psychological factors. For the case of Douglas, he covered the red flags himself in order for his parents to not see or know. Therefore, in the future, he could commit the murders and fantasies he likely, while not proven, had planned his spree. Whether if he was alone or not, it's likely when thinking about the fantasies, he didn't care whether if he had an accomplice or not. He just wanted to commit with his desires and satisfy his apparent needs. Though if an accomplice was involved, as proven, he would likely just take advantage of them. Whether if it was Carol or not, it didn't really matter to him. Overall, the case of Douglas, he did not have any emotions. He was really emotionally detached and highly narcissistic, had narcissistic desires that led to his crimes. Legacy and impact. The case of Douglas Daniel Clark proved the deeply dysfunctional and unstructured system with the California laws. Doug is one of the serial killers who awaited in death row for over 40 years. In a way, Doug is a form of a narcissistic killer. Doug's murders is a rare case of a male-female duel due to the fact it's statistically uncommon for these types of duels to operate. Oxygen's serial killer capital, Los Angeles, was made based on the case of Doug Clark. Till this day, people are enraged with the injustice of the case of Douglas Daniel Clark.